Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 57th Chicago International Film Festival. My name is Sam Flancher. I'm a programmer here, and we're thrilled to be welcoming director of The Odd Job Men, Neos Belus. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me, and thank everyone for watching the film and listening to us right now.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you could make it. You informed me before the Q&A that you just arrived from France, where you were showing the film. And you arrived 20 minutes ago, so we're glad you could take the
Absolutely. Montpellier, Barcelona, and Chicago through the net.
Exactly.
That has been my life.
I want to start just by asking about the initial inspiration for telling this tender, warm-hearted, but I think really deep and complicated story about these men. Can you talk about the sort of initial kernel of the idea and sort of the beginnings of this project?
Well, let's say the starting point was I was interested by the context of workers and specifically about plumbers and electricians. And basically, it is because my father is a plumber. So when I was a teenager, we spent like while we were like at home, he kept like talking about what happened to him that morning. He went see an old lady. She just wanted to have some tea with someone because she was super lonely. And then he had another problems with the house. There were like many dogs, and it was super dirty, and it was like a weird universe. So I realized that he had a privileged access to all our houses and realities. And he was kind of an anthropologist. He could actually see how our domestic life is. And usually we don't pay attention to people working in our house, but they get a lot of information on how we live, actually. And I thought it was an interesting starting point to talk about prejudice on how we activate, these preconceived ideas of who we have in front of us, depending of the origin and the age, and gender. So it's just, okay, I'm going to behave this way because that's how I think he or she is, So, and how it doesn't work usually. So that was the starting point, and I started doing some research on this context to build the film.
Yeah, so what kind of research would that be? I was another question of mine was, do you know anything about plumbing or the lives of plumbers and what kind of research? Obviously, you have this connection with your father, but what additional research did you apprentice a plumber and follow people around? I'd love to get a picture of that.
Well, it was super difficult to. Usually, what I would do is that, like, to go with them in their work, and just observe what they are doing. But it was really difficult to access everyone's house because I come from documentaries, so I usually go really to the reality I want to portray. But it was very difficult and slow, to get permission to any house was very, and they knew they were observed, so it wasn't working that well. So what I did is I just decided to do the casting at the same time. So I was meeting a lot of plumbers, let's say in a school of plumbers and electricians, where they all have to go from time to time because like the law changes regarding the installations and things. So they have to go from time to time. And I met there, like I was like there undercover in some classes, and I observed people and I just called the ones that I thought they were interesting. So I spent some months like that, like half a year, let's say. And I saw more than 1,000 people that told me all kind of stories about plumbing and clients.
Yeah.
And that was the starting point of the script. And of course, that's where I found the three main characters.
Yeah, so the three main characters are not professional actors, that you found them through these plumbing schools.
Absolutely not. They are professional plumbers.
Professional plumbers. Well, that is actually an incredible. That's something that I didn't know, but the chemistry that they've built together is so fantastic. I would love to hear about the process. The comedic timing specifically is something you think of as extremely difficult from a performance perspective. So can you talk about working with them to create these? It's naturalistic acting, but they're also like funny and they embody their characters so well.
Well, the point was, it's my third film without like actors, so I kind of have developed a methodology of how to work with them. So we spent 2 years meeting every week or every 2 weeks, and we just did some kind of games and improvisation so that I could see, let's say, a big spectrum of their reactions. And so that's where I found where they could be more funny and where they get angry and where they get moved, so I kind of understand them. And I just build the film so that the best of them actually could actually arise without them knowing it, because while we shoot, everything is based on a surprise. They don't know what we are gonna shoot every day. They have a real thing to fix in a house. They don't know the client, so they are actually not acting. They are being themselves, through, of course, a kind of a version of themselves that we have been building throughout these 2 years of playing and working together. And what I've seen about comedy, it's my first comedy as well, and I didn't know it was going to come out well, but it was a very different comedy. I had no references of other movies like doing it this way, because it doesn't come from the writing or from the joke that is super built.
Mm-hmm.
It's not based on construction, but on improvisation and on how the situations suddenly become very surrealistic. And I also found some comedy finally in the editing, like making a lot of ellipses of things that we never show to the audience.
Yeah, there's comedy also, I think, in the visuals and the way things are framed. I'm thinking specifically of this magnificent shot of a faucet falling over, and then you see a hand sort of appear. It's almost like a Tati-esque sort of compositional comedy. I'd love to hear about how you built the visual style and sort of told jokes with the frame.
I would have liked to do more like that, like
Mhm.
visual comedy is so it's so not used anymore in cinema, that I find it amazing, like what Tati did or Chaplin did, all the classics of when they couldn't speak. It was so amazing that I like to do this kind of, let's say, to try to put it in a new perspective nowadays, because and we were just trying to have fun in the shooting, basically. So when we found something like this that could actually talk by itself, it was a small game, even if it was not very useful for the dramatic arc, let's say, we trying to explore it.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said earlier in response to my first question, the idea of this life as a plumber as this like investigation, this mosaic investigation into the lives of other people and this like unique perspective of the world. And sort of the lives within it. So you mentioned that there was a lot of improvisation and sort of working through scenes together. But I'm wondering, was it a creative challenge to set up those kind of surreal scenarios? Like you've got this wide open, these people could be anybody. Was it hard to like limit yourself? Because while they do feel surreal, they also feel natural. So was there any temptation to like go off the deep end and do something truly crazy?
Look, the big challenge of the project, it has been to let go the control, let's say, of the situations, because of course I had the script. So, and I knew how things I would like them to develop, because I had an ending and there were things that had to progress somehow. So it couldn't be a game all the time. So it was really finding the balance between, okay, let's play and let's try to cover ourselves with the the more basic information we need for the film. And this is also because we didn't have infinite budget and infinite like days of shooting. So of course I had temptations of like, okay, let's change everything and like go somewhere else. But actually it kind of happened, because let's like imagine that the shots are around 15-20 minutes, some of them.
Mhm.
Every take is totally different from the previous one and the next one. So it was already so crazy. Editing was the most difficult thing I've done in my life, finding the balance between this naturalism and documentary style, let's say, and leading a kind of tale so that people can feel that they are really like following a story, but then also finding the balance between the drama and the comedy, and making it like light and funny, but at the same time talking about like important issues that I wanted to tackle. So the editing was absolutely crazy work, and yeah, I think that's where we found the movie, let's say, because in the shooting itself, it was wild, very diverse, and we had like more than 70 hours of material. So you can imagine how open that was, before the editing.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned the editing being this kind of arduous, difficult process, because watching the film, I would imagine the shooting being extremely difficult just because of the sheer number of locations it seems like you're going to, all kinds of some very beautiful apartments, but all kinds of different locations. It looks like you shot on location, I'm guessing.
Everything is shot on location, yeah, and in general in the houses of the real clients, so we try to be in there. We used reality basically.
Yeah.
And we kind of worked with it, as I did with the characters. We did all the elements of the film are used in this way.
Yeah, I love the way you shoot interiors. There's a lot of frames within frames and hallways framing characters, and a lot of like sort of elegant distance, I would say, maybe from the character. So I imagine it was a challenge to sort of orient yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you. That was a challenge for Anna Mullins, the DOP. Because it's not always easy to make it nice and interesting in a place where people live, and where she had to light actually as if it was a set where we could shoot like almost 360 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Because like they are not actors, they could move around, and the idea was not to stop them if something interesting was happening. So technically it doesn't seem like so complicated, but it was to make it technically possible. So yeah, it took a while to set up, let's say, all the situations for the lighting and also for the sound, because of course, dialogues are not written. So people working with the sound had, like a lot of work to, to capture all this in a nice way.
Yeah, I want to ask, because these are non-professional actors, do you have the sense that they're playing some version of themselves? Like, I'm wondering, like, how close are Valero and Moha to their actual selves, or are these truly totally fictionalized? I'm wondering about Valero specifically. It's like,
well, I was also like, they knew they were kind of protected by the idea that this was a film, so they were free to act as they would like to, and it was clear from the very beginning that in these games, like there were some ways of treating the other one that was not coming from them, but they have experienced it somehow. And I think that's what Valero does. Like, he says, it felt very natural to me to treat him this way, because this is what I've seen that happens all the time. Maybe if I don't dare to do it this way, this is what I see all the time. So it feels good for me to do it this way, So, and when they watched the movie the very first time, the three of them came to me and they say, like, you know what, this is really us, like, even if it's a fiction, but they could actually see themselves somehow,
Yeah, they perform with great depth. I think even specifically, I can't recall the character's name, but the older character who's about to retire, that the scene where he shows up and yells at the builders and is claiming they're doing it wrong, and feels like there's a great sort of human depth to his performance in that scene.
Well, thank you. I will tell him. Like with Pep, it was also very nice, I mean, he was super perfect. The guy was never angry. He was always like treating super good the both of them. He was in between. And I was wondering, like, is he able to get angry? Like, I need him angry somehow at some point in the movie, And before writing, it was like, we have to find what annoys him, like really, really, really. And there was this day that I imagine an improvisation with builders, and there was something that was not right, and he got crazy, like his face changed totally. He became like evil, and it was so we wrote the chapter basically for him to do that, so that's how the writing worked. When I see something that it's nice, what I called like a small pearl in them,
Yeah.
I basically wrote sequences so that it could happen,
Yeah. Yeah, great. So there's like a theme, I think, of communication and miscommunication, maybe like unable to like speak. You've got the like language barrier. There's sort of difference of technical sort of assertion of the technical situation in any given place. Can you talk about communication in the film and how it maybe is related to what you were saying earlier about sort of prejudice and maybe known and unknown prejudice?
Well, what I feel is that when they talk to each other, there's a lot of I don't know how do you say that in English, subtext, something that it's not in the text.
Subtext. Yep.
Subtext. Okay, it's the same.
Yeah.
So it's like what they say. It's not the most important thing, They are just covering all the time something else, and that's what we all do, And especially about Valero, that it's the character that I would say that we keep deconstructing during the film. He starts being someone, and you start understanding what's beyond all, like his way of communicating. He's super tough. He talks a lot, and it's when he actually shut up that he expresses himself better. So it's interesting how talking sometimes it's absolutely not communicating or communicating something that it's not what you think or what you would like to say.
Yeah. Well, there are some moments in the film. I wanted to ask you about the Moha's voiceover in the film, because that is like clearly orients us in his perspective for a certain number of the scenes. I'd love to hear you walk us through that choice, and because I think it really sort of is a grounding element to the rest of this kind of like chaotic naturalism, surrealism that you have going on here.
I didn't know that he was going actually to be like kind of the narrator, the one that tells us a story at the beginning of the process. But for me, it felt fair to give him the possibility of speaking his own language in another level, like for himself or for the audience, because usually when we see people from abroad that don't speak super good our own language, we think that they are much less interesting than they really are, So it's not fair, because Moha, he doesn't speak good Spanish nor Catalan, but he's super deep. He's kind of a poet, and I have seen there's a depth there that where we really connect, me and him,
Mm-hmm.
So I end up writing this voiceover with him together. So we found the subjects where we kind of found some similarities between, let's say, the point of view of a plumber who just arrives and sees our society and his job for the very first time, and filmmaking, actually, that actually is also like getting into a reality, and talking about people from some kind of distance. You also feel like someone from abroad when you do a film. There's always this distance. So by the end of the editing and the writing of this voiceover, I end up feeling very, very close to him, really. So that's why we gave this touch to the character. And his voice that really let us pause what we have seen and gives another depth as well to the everyday life scenes.
Yeah, I think the kind of, it gives this sort of charge to those wonderful exteriors as well. The apartments that you shoot, I mentioned the interiors are shot so well, but all the balconies are stunning in the film, and I think his voiceover really charges them with a kind of meaning about his station in the world and sort of the interconnectivity of everything. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think that is all the time we have for today. But Neos, I want to thank you for being here and for sharing the Odd Job Men with us here at the Chicago International Film Festival. It's a lovely piece of work. Congratulations.
Thank you, Sam. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Have a good day.
You too.